Okay, danke. Okay.
Okay, hello everybody. As Christian said, I'm Ken Clausen. I work at 3XN Architects and GXN Innovation, our research unit. I am kind of in the middle of everything at the moment. I work in the fusion between competition, project design, and research. And at these days, I am part of our research unit, but I spent maybe 90% of my time in architectural projects, linking new workflow strategies, new materials, and new fabrications together. And I'm here today in really short notice, I'm here today to talk about how we collaborate internally, how we unfold the story, and what happens behind the scenes at 3XN Architects. So the three buzzwords for today is architecture, engineering, and collaboration. But for me, it has always been linked together. It's kind of, I am an architectural engineer, kind of mixing the two fields together. I studied at a university in Denmark, and the whole purpose of that university was to bridge architecture with engineering. They wanted us to become these architectural engineers. We were really green in the field. We didn't know anything, so we just followed along. At this school, you work in groups. So every year, every semester, you have to shift to a new group and work with new people, new dynamics, and have to understand different backgrounds. So we already back then understood the importance of working in groups and sharing with the different backgrounds. But we were all super confused. At one point, we really wanted to not become too technical, because would you ever have a chance to work at an office like 3XN then? But at the other hand, we also wanted to understand the structural calculations and the daylight simulations, just what it's all about. And I feel today that I really know what it is about. I'm happy to work with all of these amazing colleagues from all over the world. And we all have different backgrounds, different approaches, and we all communicate and we design together in groups and sometimes individually. And here, Kim Herford Nielsen, our founder, wanted to be last in this GIF. He couldn't be here today, but yeah. So, as Christian already mentioned, this is our office in Copenhagen. And behind you have the Opera House, the Architecture School, and the Film School. So really a creative neighborhood. And we are around now 105, 110 people with offices in Stockholm, New York, and Sydney, smaller offices to maintain the more local projects down there. We have everything under one roof, from competition to project design and to research. And this is really important for us, that everything is one plan, because we shift around a lot in teams, and we collaborate a lot with the different research specialists together with the design teams. I think we have a really strong internal workflow, winning a competition and going all the way to project execution. But I also feel we have a strong internal workflow regarding research to practice and how we link our research findings together with our practice. I will come a bit back to that later. So, 3XN was founded approximately 30 years ago by the three Nielsens. And now, as I mentioned, Kim Herford is our creative director and the founder, the last founder who's left. And we work in different places in the world. We work with office buildings, residential buildings, aquarium, fish markets. As I said, we work in different scales. We work with engineers to develop new building techniques. We work with the engineers to understand new building materials. But first and foremost, we work for the people. It's the people that's the core setup for us to how we design our buildings, from inside out and then from the surroundings outside in. And this is, for me, my favorite slide. This is just some of the backgrounds we have at the office. So everything from anthropologists, psychologists, programmers, and architects, all working together in all of these different small and big teams, just developing everything from a little research idea to bigger architectural projects. We have quite a flat hierarchy at the office, which allows us to have these quick pin-ups every day with everything from Kim to partners to researchers, just pitching in ideas on our designs and tries to just come up with these new design developments. But we also host larger events, everything from knowledge sessions to knowledge sharing to hackathons. We invite guest speakers in to create this community of sharing, which is important for us. So, as I said, we work in many scales. This project here was a project we did for Noma, at that time the world's best restaurant. And they needed a place to play and to experiment with food. They needed a place to understand how to combine flavors, colors, tastes together. So together with them, we tried to understand how do they create these amazing dishes? How do they go from different tastes to all of these textures that you don't even understand? And we, together with the chefs, collaborated on an idea about a modular system. something that can both be a cabinet closed off or an open place where they can have some of the ingredients placed. And we created this lab that really takes everything in from just putting the plates in the right order to having places where they can experiment and just try some ingredients together. But for us, this is not only a project, there's also something behind the scenes. In this case, it was to understand, to have a modular system and go from a design idea to a more fabrication idea. So we went all the way to the fabricator and tried to understand how do they work with wood joints, how do they fabricate. And then we took all of these ideas and moved them in the front of the scene to our design tools. And in this way, we created a quite strong workflow from input design to output construction. So we learned from all of these smaller researchers, and then we apply them to larger projects. This is a project I will come back to a bit later, but it's a huge roof and a modular small system that has to be applied on a full surface. So again, research goes into practice for us. This works here. Another project we are looking at now is robots. Is robots becoming the new pencil for architects in the future? In this project, we are looking at the hot blade cutting technologies and how these can create new formwork for us and for the concrete industry. So you put in a surface, and then you get all of these curved elements out, you put them together, and you put concrete on top. This is not only us. Again, we collaborate with universities, we collaborate with robot experts, and we collaborate with material experts. So that suddenly a surface for us is not only an aesthetical surface, it's much more. It's everything from what is the math behind to how do we actually produce this. We try to understand the fabrication method of this material and how will it affect both from A and all the way to B. And then we, of course, also do mock-ups in the end to see what is the end result and what should we do better the next time, for example. This is then related back to one of our projects, and as Christian mentioned, it's the IOC project here in Switzerland. It works with a really double-curved ground floor structure, and we again applied some of the same math ideas to this IOC project, and again linking research with practice. And everything we do is open source. We share everything in books, in papers, and in workshops and knowledge sessions. And we also share this with our competitors because we believe that we should lift this together and create a community around all of these new findings we do instead of keeping them internally in our organizations. Let me just take a little sip here. So all of these collaborations, all of these backgrounds we have at the office, all of these ideas of taking research to practice, how does this actually work? To look at this, we have to understand the two workflows, how 3XN works and how GXN works, our research company. 3XN is an A to B. You win a competition, and hopefully at one point there's a building in the end. Of course, there's a lot of bumps and craziness on the way, but there's a render, there's a competition win, and hopefully it's going to look like that in the end. At the research company, it's a bit different. We have a research idea. We maybe have a question we want to have answered. We have an idea. But on the way, we collaborate with engineers, material experts, and suddenly they guide us in new directions that we couldn't predict when we started. So our outputs is sometimes output A, B, C, D. By overlapping these two, I believe we have a super strong workflow at 3XN Architects, where you have the building going from competition all the way to project execution. But then we have us as research specialists that kind of floats in and out of this workflow. It could be a daylight simulation that is needed early on in a competition phase, but it could also be a strong parametric digital model that they need later on for controlling the collaboration, for example, with the engineers. So this, for me, is really a core setup that works quite well, both in one project, but we do it in many projects. And we help out in early design phases and later on in production execution. So it's all the way from A to B. To kind of sum up and to understand how we collaborate both internally but also externally with our engineers, I brought with me two projects. The first project is the Olympic House, the IOC headquarters here in Switzerland in Lausanne. It's an office building of 25,000 square meters. We won the competition in 2014 and completion hopefully next year in 2019. The Olympic Games is all about movement. And we added flexibility and sustainability into that equation and created kind of a dynamic building for the Olympic Committee. We, of course, looked at sports and tried to look at how is the movements when these athletes do some of these crazy jumps. All of these dynamics were used as design parameters for the building itself to look at the dynamics and add dynamics into this facade and building. The building is really 3 parts. The first part is the ground floor, the double-curved concrete shape that lifts up the landscape and opens up for the ground floor and the opening to the building. The second part is kind of the top thing you see there. It's the office building itself. It's covered with a double skin layer, double skin facade, and a curved roof. And the third layer is, or the third part is the interior. It is the staircase. It is the staircase that connects the people with the building. And of course, this is an inspiration from the rings themselves and how they could be reconfigured in a more spatial configuration. The building site is really moving ahead. This is when we installed one of the structures for one of the staircases. And this picture here, all of the curved formwork is done, but I simply just love this picture here because you sit every day and nerd around with your tools. You sit and try to get the perfect curve, you get all of the spreadsheets correct, and then you see these guys, they go out and in no time they create a beautiful double-curved geometry. I was really in shock and respect at the same time. And this is the output, like for me both brutal, raw, beauty at the same time, super cool project. But again, we can ask ourselves, how do we collaborate? How do we collaborate on such a tricky facade with our facade engineers and our structural engineers? In this case, we looked at the players and parameters. Who are we as designers and architects? And how do we link with our structural engineers and our facade engineers? We looked at the data exchange that are often the problem between teams, that suddenly we have to export and import and nobody knows where the model is. So we decided to look at, can we make one model that connects everything? So first we created this strong digital model from design input to a lot of outputs, a lot of data outputs, both for the engineers and for us to use. Because this facade has different glass, different angles all over, so every time there was just the smallest design change, everything was affected, and it was new numbers and data again. So everything, we managed to get into this dynamic collaborative workflow together with our engineers. So when they had an input, a detail that should be changed, a dimension that should change, we added this to the model, and all of the spreadsheets were then updated in the end. So for us, we didn't only look at the building from an aesthetical point of view, but we always had in mind how the technical point of view as well is. How does it perform? How does the structure work? This allowed us to go a bit away from these more decoupled systems that we normally use, and are more going over to these coupled systems now, beginning to interact with the engineers more early on in our design phase and design development phases. This is a render of hopefully how the facade is gonna look. This is the mock-up at the building site to understand different materials, different glass reflections. And this here is a picture from last week of where we are at the moment, so it's really beginning to get some power to it or some scale where you can see the curved concrete formwork kind of beginning to create these canopies. The second project I brought with me is Sydney Fish Market in Sydney, Australia. It is a huge project for us. It is 100,000 square meters. It has shrunken now, but it's still huge for us. We won this competition last year, and I think completion is 2022 or something. Our approach was basically to look at what is a fish market today, and what could a 2.0 fish market be in the future. So this was our proposal, to create this carpet where everybody could connect with the city, could connect with the building, and it became this really open space with an interior modular system creating all of the different spaces. And then a curved roof that connects the building with the surroundings. And from inside, we wanted to create these spaces where people meet at different times and also with different purposes, from being at a restaurant to just enjoying the space and the view. So as I said, we had to understand what is a fish market for us. A fish market today is more import-export. You get your fish in, you clean cut, and then you export to supermarkets or restaurants. We wanted exactly the same, but with kind of an extra layer, an urban layer fabric on top that could allow for people to meet at different locations and at different times during the day. To kind of create a fish market 24/7. So first of all, we had to understand what are the attractions at the moment at the Sydney water edge, just to understand where are we in all of these cultural attractions. The second question we ask ourselves, can the building itself become this connector? between the promenade, water, and park, linking everything together in one building. So we looked at the water edge first, like creating these urban sea farmings, these swimming pools, just adding a lot of extra functions to the existing place. The second thing was we developed these 9 drivers for experience, because this is a huge area, or a huge building for us. So we wanted to create different experiences around the building, and how could these communicate and connect with each other. We then put an extra layer on top of it, which was kind of a Lego system, a plug-and-play modules, where we had certain green developed modules, we had some different restaurant types, and then we started combining these and creating these urban spaces within this building here. So this was the proposal from the competition, really connecting water, park, and promenade together. But now we are in design development, and things change. So now it has shrunken a bit, and we are beginning to develop a bit more on the roof again. And as I talked about earlier, the whole modular system and behavior from our NOMA project is suddenly being linked to this super great scale project. We suddenly understand, but we need to understand how to fabricate these elements before we put them all out on the facade. We also understood from the IOC project that we need early on to collaborate with our engineers and some of our fabricators to understand how do we put this information into our model early on when things change on a daily basis. So this component here, for us, became kind of similar to NOMA, a component that can do a lot. Everything from a water gutter system to a shading device. The engineers are already informing us with different places to apply the columns, different places and sizes in terms of the beams. When they update the numbers, we put them into the model, and then everything updates and adapts again. And for us, it creates a quite strong workflow with our engineers. At the same time, we're looking at how to create one type instead of a million types, again, to look at how we can mass produce something instead of using a lot of material and cuts and molds on something that should actually be made easy. And we can go from a more local small joint and up to testing it on large scale. And this is how we switch every time internally when we work together, and also externally with our collaborators. And here, just the last couple of slides are some of the views from different areas. And this here is the last one, really shows what we want. We want really to have our architecture bring people together. I think this was it for me, Christian.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Great.
Go down.
Thank you, Ken. Now we will hear the second keynote from Thibodeau Francis Kéré. He was born in 1965 in Gando, Burkina Faso, and studied at the Technical University in Berlin. Parallel to his studies, he established the Kéré Foundation, formerly Schulbausteine für Gando, ein Verein. And in 2005, he founded Kéré Architecture. His architectural practice has been recognized nationally and internationally with awards, including the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, and for his first building, a primary school in Gando, Burkina Faso. Kéré has undertaken projects in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Germany, and many other countries. He has held professorships at Harvard, and also is still a professor at the Accademia in Mendrisio. In last year, he has accepted the professorship for architectural design and participation that was created especially for him at the Technical University in Munich. Kéré continues to reinvest his knowledge back into Burkina Faso and other sites across all continents. He has developed innovative construction strategies that combine traditional building techniques and materials with modern engineering methods. Also in 2017, last year, he has designed and built the Serpentine Pavilion in London's Hyde Park. That is on the invitation. I think Kéré is one of the most important representatives of socially engaged contemporary architecture. Please welcome Francis Kéré.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Hi, hallo. Ich wollte auf Deutsch reden, aber ich darf auf Englisch sprechen, also für meinen Kollegen. Herzlichen Dank fürs Kommen und thank you so much for inviting me to join this group, and thank you for this great work. I hope you will see that I work in a different field, but what we're doing is what you said, is for people. So, and in my cooperation, I have to say it's not easy because I need to travel a lot. So while being here with you, you have to know that my students are in Mozambique, in Tet. 1.5 day of traveling far from here. But I wanted to come to share and even to learn from my other friends. That's why I'm here. Cooperation is something very important to me, but education is very important. I believe in this picture that you see. It's called the Verve, standing on the shoulder of giant. It's dated back in the 12th century and is from Bernhard von Chartres. Just to make it easy, I think it's about being successful and learning from the past. So Isaac Newton says, if I was able to see further, it is because standing on the shoulder of giant. And I will translate this and say, if I am standing before you today, ladies and gentlemen, it is because I have access to education. Today, in this time of speed internet, iPhone, smartphone, whatever you call them, in some places, people, so like in Burkina Faso, more than 60% of the population has no access to education. So it's a great privilege for me to be standing before you here today. This is where I'm coming from. I was born here, is the secret. That is my own compound in Burkina Faso. A great complexity. There, knowledge has been passed from a mother to a daughter, and from a father to a son, and from a grandfather to a son, and to etc. So if you see this, you know that transmission, oral transmission, can be mistranslated. And this is and that is where my work is to be understood. And then we had a connection to the West. I may say here that for Burkina Faso, this was the beginning of modern architecture. So trying to transform that kind of structure in a modern city. So here I am critical, not those that introduce this structure, but to ourselves, to me, to my people, that we are so weak, that we stand and just making the West culpable of our situation today instead of creating. So this is a little critics that I have. This is the reality in Burkina Faso. So if you travel across the country, you don't need to stay. You can, from your car, you can shot pictures. And this is a school. Ladies and gentlemen, I had the chance to attend education in the building like this, with a classroom like this. And so this is why I am privileged. And you will ask yourself, what do you do if you are privileged? This is what I'm going to show you. That's why my letter is called Working Report. I wanted to learn from things that exist in Africa, like getting together to build a house. It is a shame if you build a house in my place alone, or just with some worker, and you don't include your neighbor. It's a big, big shame. It's a big problem. I don't know how to express it. So I wanted to use this way of working and just introduce the knowledge that I have learned in Europe. You have to know that I stopped to study in 2001 to go home and build. And you will see later I was very successful with that idea, but it was a stupid idea, I have to say. Because in my culture, who is older own the knowledge. No wonder. More than 60% and then 90% in the village have no access to information. So if you are a young community member, you come and say, hey, I want to build a school with you. Everyone is happy. But Francis, where is the money? So let your friends send us money, and we're going to let the school be built. You say, no, I want to build a school with you. But how you can build a school? We just send you to school. How do you know that? So this has been a very important issue in my way of working with my community, sharing knowledge, explaining. And so you see, this is already the extension building of the school that I did. And this is the school. It was a battle, but we did it using clay that is coming, believe me, 200 meters from the site. We use rebars. We use a metal sheet. You can't find them in cities because they're growing. And where you build bridges, you have rebars. And the roof is made completely out of rebars. And this is the building inside, the first school that I built as a student. And you see the comparison. So left or on your right, you could see you could touch the ceiling. It's metal sheet, very thin. And outside, they say it's 45 degrees. You can imagine how hot it is inside. And for me, this is great because it has access to knowledge. And I saw further than my people, so I could introduce something new. What did I introduce? I tried to create simple structure that even in the drawing, you have the entire project. If you come with a lot of paper and drawing, no one can read them. So you have to find a strategy with a simple issue you build. Here, for example, we pin up in the walls the layers of the bricks. And you just put by number 5. So here, you put a little piece of rebars. These people understand. And so on we build. But I introduced something that is important, a double ceiling and roof system, which allowed the air to flow, and by the way, cooling the building very simply, naturally, without using, energy, electricity that we don't have in the village. So this is the building, and for you it looks simple, but for my people, this is a big innovation. Buildings normally need to be repaired after every rainy season, and even government-built building breaks after 3-4 years. But here is the building built in 2001. It is still there, and for the people, like a miracle. Engineering is miracle to my people. So, but how do you explain engineering or architecture so to people who are neither able to read nor write? What we do is most of the time to make big market, and everyone come to see how it works. And then you have to demonstrate. In the middle one is me. Most of the time I jump on the top of the building, and my closest collaborator, who are my brothers, just joined me because it's your brother, your sister. You cannot let her or him alone. You have to join him. Even for a culture like mine, it is stupid to do things like this. But everyone came and it's sending. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleague, what you cannot see, you see it in this gentleman with the red cap. This guy. So it is a picture that shows you the entire village is sitting, standing, and watching what you're doing. We don't record, but the memory of the people in my place is so long. The biggest issue, there is no regulation, really, no, but there is the people. If it crashes, you have to know that no one that came from a family will be able to convince the village anymore. So those was the constraint, that you have to fight and express that your idea is good. And so it works. I was very lucky. We could build a lot, building vault, trying to change the shape of the building all the time when we build a little vault that is a ceiling. And it was great. So suddenly, institutions start to see my work as a good example. The first one to give me a job was the Aga Khan Network for Development. They allowed me to build a museum and a huge park with infrastructure in Mali. So allowing me to replicate almost the Gando model with glass. This was my very first building with glass. But the exciting thing is they allowed me to use very thin structure element to build. Why is this important? Mali is a country where you have almost desert, and people build huge building in specific mosque, and for the roof and the ceiling, they cut the wood to do it. And you will agree with me, doing so in a country that is a desert is not innovative. It is a crime, almost. But people don't know. And so the Aga Khan Network for Development allowed me to introduce this system, and it was the best thing that you can do. Now people really love it. You will see housing built by these techniques, and in Germany, Swiss or Österreich, or everywhere in Europe, you will say this is called coffee from yesterday. But for the people in my place, this is great innovation. So, but how do we build? How do I organize a building site? And what I really do, first of all, to travel a lot, which is not good, you understand. If you ask me to do a building somewhere far, and my office will ask you, do you have a budget? Because most of the people in Africa want to have buildings, great things, but the next step is, but Mr. Kéré, we have no money. So Mr. Kéré, we are a little association. Mr. Kéré, we are a little initiative, but we love your work. Too much love with no money, it doesn't work. So you will believe me. I mean, here is economically everyone is good. The ladies are informed. In Africa, if you say to a lady, I love you, and after 1 year, if you cannot fit her, she go. And I think maybe it's not here in Switzerland, but believe what I'm talking about. So the love to my work is really hard. It makes me travel a lot. So here I show you how we really do work. Here is an idea to create a compound, a sort of compound for a school. And to introduce, again, every time when I have a chance, I introduce something new. Here are wind towers. You know, it is very hot. And if you have a little chimney, it works. So this was the simple idea. And another issue is land. If you arrive, you have to cooperate with the people living there. You have to go around and ask, does this lady really own the land? She shows me a paper, but you have to ask the elders. When they said yes, then you check again. And that we do, because land is a big, big issue. You will start to build, and after 2 meters, the walls are looking beautiful, and 2 meters high, someone will come and say, oh, thank you. I have a beautiful, it is my land. So it's a big struggle for those that dream to do work in that area. This is delicate. So, but what I do is to check this, and if it's clear, I take control. In this project, which is a high school, we wanted to introduce laterite. Laterite is a miraculous stone. You take it from the ground, it is soft, and with the wind, it's getting hard because you have iron inside. And with the air, is oxidation. And what we do is in front of the people to cut the laterite with a machine like we do. The machine cutting means to my people it has a higher value. The same stone that I know for generation has, in their eyes, become a very important material. So good to me. And this is the site. When we really start to build, you can see the towers growing, and you have to be there. And so allowed me to tell you, if paperwork was good enough to introduce good things, I mean, Africa would be developed than more other continents in the world. And those that are related to development work knows what I'm talking about it. Or it is wrong. All the billion that every government is telling that are sent to Africa, maybe this is wrong. But if this is not wrong, then paperwork will not help to do good project in Africa. So for me, the architecture, I have to keep going. And the good thing is, if you do what I'm doing, you will have a lot of energy from the people. You see that we're building simply, and for these people, our building buildings processes are like events, and everyone come to watch. Like these little kids with their parent that just sit and see what we're doing. And we do. And here, another element that we wanted to add to the walls are eucalyptus wood, or let me say, simple wood that people use for scaffolding. We wanted to give them another meaning, so we cut them, fix them together, like you can see with the simple flat steel. We wrap them with a piece of metal. And the windows. The windows are not simply windows. How we use them is like you can see in this section. The idea is to use them to cool down the inside air. And so we use the leftover and we create sittings, and under the sitting you can put little buckets. So if in the place you know that it can be 50 degree, and you see that you can use the evaporation to just put humidity inside the classroom, so you are creating a comfort which is good for teaching and learning. This is what we try to do. But it's not finished. We have to plant trees, but it is simply said, it's not a job of an architect. So, but you will see it's necessary, it's important to do it, because I grew up listening to the elders that teach us the nature is giving us everything. What they don't count with the growing cities, and everyone come and take everything from the nature. So we are so many that the nature cannot fit us. We have to help the nature. I am doing this because I have access to information, you know. And so what we do is the right, or on your left, on my right, we try to put a little element to carry water. And the picture you see is a wrong picture, because this is already a deep rainy season. Normally it is dry. And we bring them to the site, and we dig a big hole, and this is the issue. If in a country where life expectation is far under 55th, and you say to somebody to dig a hole which is 2 meters deep and 1.5 meters or 2 meters diameter, to put the plant that they will never see grow, you understand, you cannot convince. What I'm doing to try to call the orders and dig and put the tree, by visiting me, by standing and watching me doing it, already they allowed their grandchild to do so, you know, if I am successful. And that's what we do. You see the trees are already grown, and that is very simply to show you the project, what's happening. It grows, and the trees are big. Here is a facade. My client didn't love it, but I love it. On the Burkina people, it shows you it's full of life. And you see that the kids are really so happy. So Ken was saying it's about people, and that is it. And here, more in Burkina than here. So if you create a structure like this, people start to set up around the building, which create another conflict. But for me, it is like I am helping. You know, I'm doing something that is good. So this is the project. And standing here, you have to know that I have that is another project close to the same site. Talking to you, I have 7 or 8 or 12 a building, a site, every single one double that size that you can see. And it is amazing to see how you could just, with little drop of water, change, you know, a desert into a green place. To do the own project in Gando, I had a foundation. It's mean. He says Schulbausteine für Gando e.V., and his talk also about Kéré Foundation. On the way to the hotel yesterday, he was saying foundation sounds like, yeah, it's wealthy. No, it's not wealthy. The fact that we changed the name is, I had a lot of friends that says, Francis, you're using Schulbausteine für Gando e.V. to collect money. If you talk about this in the US, no one knows you, but they know your work. Why you don't call it Kéré Foundation? I mean, Kéré Foundation, it sounds great. Yeah. And it's cool, yeah. But the fact is the same struggle. So, but what I do if we raise the money, if I'm not standing here and have time, I go to schools in Germany, really me, I run. Since I live here, I know movement is good for my health, you know. I go with little kids, I run. You know, they're so great. They don't run and collect 10,000 euro and ask you, what are you doing with it? Then now you're going to bring pictures with a new project. They don't want you to send paperwork. And doing that with them, you can create building and you run. It's no government institution, no association that will keep you a lot of paperwork before giving you the money to do, but I admire your work. So with these kids, it's double. I get money, but being in good form. Be careful, I am in good form. So, and then if I have the money, there's a little team what I have in Gando. The entire village has become my team, and it is a pity now because I work a lot outside and they are in struggle. They think I'm running away, and I explain, no, I'm not running away. I have simply a lot of work to do. But they said, yes, but we want you to come and do this work here. And so, but with these women, you can do great things. With the pot, look what I do. I trace, and we start to destroy them, cutting them. Again, innovation. Through simple things, for you is like your daily life. You even don't see it, but for my people, cutting them first, why he's destroying them? And I keep doing, because you will see the kids, they're not here, I make it short because of the time. You will see little kids watching that. And we put them on the top of the roof to pour concrete, like you can see, and to create openings for ventilation and light. So simple. And the people see, wow, this is the simple pots that we know, that my grandmother is making. He used it for other things. And that is how I try, cooperating, talking to the people and using what I have, create, to introduce innovation in other house. Since the foundation is not working, I have started to do projects here. In Europe, I did, at the site of Vitra Design, I did a shop for Camper and Vitra together. But in a lecture like this, you cannot show that. Because that's what I'm doing in Africa, is like fresh and new. However, more people has become aware of what I'm doing, and so the Serpentine Gallery, who asked me last year to just join. Of course, I have no need to say it's a privilege. And for me, because I simply said, okay, let's build a tree. Okay, a tree. Okay, a tree, yes, it's a park. So not a tree, but a vision, a picture of this tree. It's a design element. And this tree is used for gatherings, meeting, as a classroom, a kindergarten in my home country. So people gather together during the day to talk. So if you create something like this in Hyde Park, you will allow people to just experience a park in a different way. So let's go. We did a narrative with sketches to create a big canopy. And here I had a big chance to collaborate with one of the most important engineer companies like Ecom that helped me to just push ideas that I have, normally using, like this overspan to the extreme. And we work with Stage 1 to fabricate all of these things. And then I was also inspired by the textile in Burkina Faso or in Africa on the traditional bricks layer. So we wanted to just work like doing bricks work, and very quick. We do a lot of models, mock-ups in the office, and we check for ourselves to understand would it work? And if you know about it, then you could just convince the client or the partner, and the engineer. And if it works, you go to serious material here. And then Stage 1, build the structure one by one to check it, because building in London is very, very difficult, and the Serpentine time is so tight. You have to collaborate with everyone, but this is a great experience. The Serpentine people are so demanding, but they are supportive. They do whatever to just make you or help your idea become true. So it was intense but great. When everything was fixed, we brought everything to the site and just install it. So like you can see. So this is the kindergarten in front. So if you go a while, you come, people are sliding. And it's amazing to see what you think and then try to work to collaborate and then find a way how you just create things for people and suddenly they just do what you was hoping. I wanted people to sit. People came to sit and suddenly see the architect, but they start to interact. I love that. So, and that is what you can do. So this is the building. Is now, last night, I know that it passed the border to Malaysia. Since it's official, I can tell it. It will go to become a second life in Malaysia as a museum, a gallery, and something to contemplate. But let me go back and try to see another way of cooperation, which is difficult, or a damnness. Here, Ouagadougou. Here, young people stand against the president that wanted to change the competition, who would make him president alive. So the young generation now has access to information, to internet, to whatever. They stand against him. And by the way, they burned down the Parliament House. And that is why I'm showing you that. I got a call to join a group of thinker, intellectual activists to think about rebuilding a new one, which should be transparent, open, and everything inside. And have a museum, and have a memorial for those that have been killed. And if you know very good my place, you know if they call you, you have to go. You know that they have no money to build, but you have to go. If you don't go, he is famous, but he don't want, the country is calling the country's son, and he refused to come. But he's famous, it is killing you. So I respond. And with the provocation, again, go back, don't copy a parliament house from France or from, I don't know, from, Bern, We will not have the technical, power to do it, neither the financial means. So go back to the tree, and everyone get first shock. Francis wants us not to be developed. He think like this European, And then I said, no, let's go back to the tree, create a little garden, close to the debate hall, so you could just go there for informal talk, but then create a pyramid. And people start to become nervous. Say, yes, the first pyramid was created in Africa, so we had in pastime builder, why we don't do that? So everything was good, but the idea was to create a public gathering space with the idea, if it really happened, they will not burn it down because the people will own the house. So you should allow them all the time to enter the building. But I start to say, at agriculture field, you see the fields on the right. You see on the top, Burkina Faso is a poor country. We don't build cars. We don't have a Swiss economy. We don't have Swiss banks. We don't have German banks. We don't have, Peugeot, BMW, whatever. We don't have that. But we have agriculture. I think a Parliament House should reflect the culture, the economy of the culture. And I start to put this, and everyone becomes scared. It's too echo. But I didn't give up because I didn't want to build the project. I wanted them to say no. And then I went we got some nice ideas. Then I went to meet the Parliament President, and I was like sitting, I saw his face, and inside I started to be happy. Because the first group that called me was saying, you will never have a decision maker that accepts this project, Francis. No leader will accept this in Africa. So I went very brave, and I was sitting for the Parliament President to say goodbye. To my surprise, he loved the concept. He was a sort of little revolutionary. And then the struggle started. But he asked me to reduce the size. He asked me to design everything inside precisely. So we don't have resources to do a project like this. It takes all the resources. But then it started to push the project to connect to the West, again, to find people that can finance the project. And so how we did it, it's first, we had a picture in the office, and someone took it, is Andrea, to mount it and say, Francis, if you show the Parliament President shaking hand of Obama, they're going to build a house. They're going to accept. Of course, this was very exciting in Burkina Faso. They really love it. And even the parliament president came to Berlin to visit me. So, still not having the money and thinking what we do. And suddenly, there was election in the US. And someone said, now we have to change that picture. The US has a new president. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where my cooperation stopped. So we will never change that picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis. You made me feel a little bad that you have to travel so much to come to us, but I'm sure that a lot of your ideas have impressed us here. The next and last contribution is from Matthias Schuler. He is an environmental engineer and founder of Transsolar Energietechnik in Stuttgart. Matthias studied mechanical engineering and founded the company Transsolar in '92 and runs it with 65 employees today. And they are one of the leading global provider of consulting services on developing sustainable design strategy in buildings together with architects. He's professor of environmental technology at Harvard and is teaching courses in sustainability and climate engineering. Matthias has worked with a large number of well-known architects and on high-profile projects that you may know, so with Herzog de Meuron, Stephen Hall, Bainish, Jean Nouvel, Kéré, Murphy-Yawn, OMA, and so on. His activities moved also beyond the building scale, and he was working on energy and comfort solutions at the master plan scale, like the carbon-neutral Masdar development in Abu Dhabi together with Norman Foster. Please welcome Matthias Schuler from Transsolar.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for the invitation. It's pretty hard, Francis, after your lecture, to do a lecture on innovation, because it's quite interesting. Your innovation has a lot to do with communication, and I see it in our case, and I'm now the engineer in this row because we heard two architects, where I would see Francis is more, I think you are more, in my opinion, aside of being an architect, you are a great humanist, because you take the people and kind of learn and work with them. I think this is wonderful. So I'm the engineer, and we are working with architects since 25 years, and Christian mentioned it, trying in a certain way to introduce sustainability into architecture. And when we started 25 years ago, this was one of the visions we had in mind, because I worked, before I started the company, at university, and we researched like 55 people all over the world in the best projects all over the world, where the projects where a team was approaching it, and similar was Ken was mentioning, from the beginning, engineers and architects working together, and even partially including the client into this field from the beginning to develop an idea, to develop a project. Now, what was interesting at that time, or we approached it, we started it, and what we always were facing, that people said a lot of the ecological architecture in respect of architectural quality is not what it should be. There had been, and you remember the first passive houses which looked more like boxes than like real good architecture. So I developed at a certain point, this must be like 15 or 20 years ago, the idea that we should connect sustainability and sustainable architecture with good world-class architecture, with the top level, by kind of, I call it like a strategy, by infiltrating the minds of this good design architects, top level, Pritzker Prize levels of sustainability, and get them connected and get them excited that this is a good idea. And I will show you some of these results of this collaboration, where most of them driven by, and this is now Sanaa, this was our second building we did with Katsuyo Seshima. And they are definitely not known as being the greenest architects in the world. They are quite stringent and known for their clear and minimalistic architecture. And in this case, the Zollverein School, the site gave us such a strong kind of possibility because it's the site of an old coal mine. And they digged for coal like for 100 years. And in a certain way, they stopped like 30 years ago, they stopped to dig for it because it was never not more economical to dig for coal in Germany. But because of governmental reasons to think about there might be a crisis in some years, they kept the mine dry. So this is a mine which goes down to minus 1,000 meters. They're pumping permanently the water up because otherwise it would flood. So since 1985, then they closed the mine. They are permanently pumping water up from 1,000 meters, which is around between 30 and 35 degrees warm. So we said, and this water normally goes to the next river, and then before it goes to the Rhine, it's kind of cleaned. But this free energy kind of helped us in the combination, because Katsuyo Seishima, when she kind of developed the project, the windows were pretty small, and the German code would call for a 50-centimeter deep wall, concrete, deep insulation, and she was very kind of afraid that her windows would become deep holes. So finally, we developed the quite radical idea to say we do a monolithic 25 or 30 centimeter thick concrete wall. We put plastic pipes in there. We use the warm water from the ground, pump it through the walls, and do what we call then an active insulation. So by this kind of innovative ideas, and the client was a bit alarmed and said, yeah, but Mr. Schuler, where is this done before? I said, there's no reference, you are the reference, which made him a bit nervous, but finally we could convince him by engineering that this would work. They built it, the building is working. We added as well below this heavy ceilings, which have these bubbles inside, the tubes, so even all the heating of the building is done with the system. And finally, this building has a very thin wall. So the architectural idea, creating this paper-thin, she calls it paper-thin walls, are connected to the local resource, which was as well very interesting because the local people in Essen, where everybody has a father or a grandfather who worked in the mines, kind of felt this is a building for their location because the warm water coming from the mine, this is the last memory of the coal, of the black coal, how they call it, in this site. So this was a quite. And you see here, this is the mining tower in the back, and you see the line. We are connecting to this mining tower 300 meters to feed our building from these local resources. Another project, and Christian mentioned, we worked since, I would say, more than 20 years with Helmut Jahn, a German architect, known at 94 when he called us in. We were like 6 people in the company, and he won the competition for the new airport in Bangkok, which was a quite glassy and translucent airport because his idea, it's a 24-hour airport, that this is an airport which is flooded with light. On the other side, the client was very alarmed that this would get too noisy, too loud, so we had to develop a concept for this envelope, a triple-layer membrane, kind of fritted glass, and the concept of conditioning this space is mainly by a cooled floor. So it's a cooled floor and some displacement ventilation. So you're only cooling where the people are, and you are not cooling in a certain way. The height of the space is up to 27 meters, so you don't need to reach up with the cooling up to this. This is very interesting. By collaborating on this project in the beginning, kind of we learned the communication with Helmut Jahn, and you will see one of the next project. Finally, then 15 years later, we developed the most green high-rise building in the world, the headquarters of the Deutsche Post. So it's kind of a process. You have to learn to convince people with these technologies. This is the kind of the floor. We know it from floor heating in Bangkok. We used it for floor cooling. We worked with Vitra and Renfro Piano on this kind of Diogene, living on a small footprint, because the idea was that we should, at the moment, I think in Europe, typically each of us lives in the range of 35 to 40 square meter, our living area, and you can check with your home and how many people you are in your family. So, but this is too much in a certain way. What we should do, we should go back to around 20 or 25 square meter. This is a very radical solution where Renfro, this is a dream of his life to develop this house with 6 square meter, where you have to live as well a lot of the time outside. It's a little house, it's energy and water autonomous, so it produces all the heat, and it's clear, on a sunny day, then at the end you have to decide, okay, do I'm cooking in the evening or I take a hot shower? So you have only one source, and you have in a certain way to think about this limited source, which I think is a good exercise we all have to think about. In this case, we combine the solar system on electricity production and warm water production and cooling production. A house we just opened, this is Frank Gehrie's new private house. With 88 years, he moved in his new private house, which is in Santa Monica, close to the ocean. This is the model of the house. He designed it together with his son, Sam Gehrey. So Sam and his dad designed the new house where his dad at the moment is living. They moved in there. Frank's approach from the beginning, and this is after a collaboration of around 12, 15 years. He said, Matthias, in this house, I want to show that we should not only talk about sustainability, we should do it. So this is a zero energy house he built for his own. And it's interesting, in this case, Frank said, the trees I'm planting, they have to be big because I won't see them growing. Okay, moving in with 88, it's clear you don't have even 55 years to wait on. So we developed this house, and he said there should be no air conditioning, natural cross-ventilated. So we kind of developed, it has a geothermal system, PV on the roof to collect it. We developed a kind of a gravity-cooled system, which is in a double wall. You can think it on like a convector we use for heating. In this case, it's behind a double wall, and it's for cooling, and just the natural kind of gravity, the natural forces runs kind of the airflow to do a certain tempering in the house, which you need typically in California or in Santa Monica around 2 months of the year. It has quite glazed living and dining room at the south end of the house. This is the garden where it connects to a kind of a guest house. There's a big lap pool because he swims every morning for an hour, keep him fit with 88. And this is the energy system where we are collecting the energy to do it. So kind of it's as a consequence, and it's clear this house for Frank Gehrey is as well a testimony to the future, to the next generations, that you should do it on your own. This is the living room, big wooden structure in this fully glazed house. We worked a bit in Africa. In this case, it was interesting. My students at Harvard University developed in a class a kind of a concept for a hospital in Africa. A hospital in Africa, the problem is that typically in a hospital, the World Health Organization says you need an air change. You need 10 to 12 air changes, which means 10 to 12 times an hour. You have to replace the air in a space, because typically you have like 15 to 20 kind of patients in the same room, and otherwise the cross-contamination in between the beds would be too big. So you have to ventilate it. Now, they did it very perfectly, kind of, let's say, 100 years ago in the hospitals they built. When they invented the generator and the fan, the typical hospitals today in Africa, they have a mechanical ventilation system. They are like boxes, and often they are even containers, and you pump the air in. The big problem is either the generator is broken, so there is no electricity, or there is no fuel, or the fans are broken. So the mechanical system is not totally reliable, and often the ventilation rates are not as what they should be. So we were kind of going to rethink the process and said, is it possible to build a natural cross-ventilated hospital in Africa? And in this case, to convince the World Health Organization, instead of investing in a container hospital, to build a hospital with their own people on site. In this case as well, the people built their own hospital, which is a great experience because, as Francis mentioned it, they treat it as their castle. This is their castle. They built this hospital. So they will be taking so much care on it because this is their castle they were allowed to build. So this is just quite simple, and this is quite similar what we saw in Francis schools, doing cross-ventilation kind of doing as well a double roof that you don't get the heat from across. So, and this is finally the space. The students finally could convince the World Health Organization that an integrated design has a certain value, that they can be in the same budget than the container hotel would be, and together with the Clinton Foundation, finally they built this hospital, which is now operating in Rwanda, and out of this they got pretty well known. They are now an office of 50 people. So based on this first hospital, and there's just the next one, and there's a big one we are building now in Liberia as well. So from the cross ventilation on top of a hill, kind of coming to other sites where there is no wind, you have to introduce a chimney, and suddenly the chimneys become like the market sign of these hospitals. And there was like the health minister of Rwanda who said, I love chimneys, because they can't fail, they don't need fuel. So you use the local stone, you use the local power to run it, instead of relying on technical systems which need maintenance and which need kind of resources. As I mentioned, learning from Bangkok, Helmut-Jan, and if you would hear a lecture of Helmut-Jan today, he would talk about user comfort, he would talk about daylight, he would talk about quality of an operable facade. So a process in this collaboration is as well an education on both sides. So he is, now he's 78 today, this year. So he learned even in the last 20 years a lot to improve his architecture. This is the headquarters of the Deutsche Post. We did like 10 years ago in Bonn, which was an outstanding building at that time, being one of the greenest towers. And instead of doing a central ventilation system, we introduced this little ventilation units at the facade together with an exposed ceiling, which is mainly connected to the Rhine. We have wells, 2 wells, which are running the building, so there's no chiller. It's just the groundwater which comes, because we are like 100 meters from the Rhine, which pushes into the ground. We pump it out. It gives us, even in summer, when the Rhine is already 26 degrees, the water from the ground is still 15. So with this 15-degree water, without a chiller, we condition this headquarter of one of the big logistic kind of companies of the world. And the point of the client was, this is a building which I built for my people, for my employees, and they should feel comfortable, because if they feel comfortable, their productivity goes up and I get the most out of it. So it's kind of not only in respect doing good for people, but as well doing good for ecology, and economy in this case is really fitting together into one line. Now, I'm jumping, and you saw the Zollverein School. This is the Louvre à Lens, a new museum. We won the competition with Sanaa in Lens, and you see in this drawing on the left side the red circles where the entrance hall, the entrance lobby, which should be an unconditioned space, because Katsuyo Seishima's thinking was, this is an unconditioned space. You just come from outside, you are just sheltered, but then from there you should get open from this unconditioned space into the gallery. And if you ever worked on a museum, for the curators, this is the worst, because they said, oh my God, there is humidity or cold outside and dry, and there are all these valuable paintings which have to be protected. So, but for the architects, it was a no-go to build a door there, because this door would kind of cut the people from the exhibition. So what we developed is an air door. This was, and the client asked, where's the reference? I said, there's no reference, you are the reference. So it's a 1.5 meter deep, like very slowly running air curtain, not like in a big shopping mall where you get the streams along the facades. It's a very smooth airflow, which by the steps creates a stability. And this were a laboratory test we did in Stuttgart in a certain with a local company, where we finally, from the engineering idea, developed it into a product. We could show that the red dots show what would happen in respect of air exchange depending on the temperature difference. If you do nothing and you see the red line, this is when you now install the air curtain in the building, then you can cut it down to like a tenth. And finally, the Louvre before they opened the museum, they tested the system for half a year because the people were, or the curators were a bit alarmed if this would really work. They proved it, and it worked. And you can, if you ever in Lens and you see it at the bottom, this is as well an old mining site. So you see the old kind of these mountains where they dig the ground out and piled it outside of the city. It's in the center of the city. It's above an old mine. This kind of great museum, and you see on the bottom right side, you see this is where the door of the gallery, of the full conditioned gallery, connects to the unconditioned lobby space with this kind of air curtain in the space. So again, in this case, I would say the clear vision of the architect kind of triggered us engineers to develop a new system to fit onto this. Christian mentioned Stephen Hall Architects in New York. In this case, this was our first collaboration, 165,000 square meters of housing in Beijing. And in this case, it was quite interesting. At that time, this is now, I would say, 15 years ago, Stephen Hall was not known for his green architecture. But the client in this case, the developer, said, I have to be outstanding on the Chinese market. So this building we are building should be better, should be performed better. So finally, we had the luck. Stephen Hall approached us, and we developed this concept for these towers. You see these 8 towers. The biggest or the most well-known is they call the linked hybrid because they have this sky bridge in the 20th floor. And it's quite interesting because the sky bridge was developed because Stephen said, the client asked first for a gated city. And Stephen said, I can't do a design for a gated city where a fence is around it. I have to build a city where I even add 2 cinemas and a hotel and a kindergarten, because I want the people that this is an alive city, not just a fenced city. So he said, but if the people living there want to have a safe haven, they get this loop. So they live up there. They can live up there. If they are too afraid to come down to face the other people, they can live in their own world up there. This is why he created this kind of linked bridge. What is interesting here, we kind of convinced the client to say, okay, you should do a geothermal system because you have heating and cooling demand, they fit close together, so you should take the heat to heat the building in winter from the ground and dump the heat from your cooling into the ground back. Now, as a consequence, we drilled 600 wells down into the ground, each 100 meter deep, kind of to use this. This is the biggest geothermal system ever built in China. But now to convince the client that this is as well an economical solution, we showed him that doing this system, we can free up all the roof surfaces of these 8 towers. Now, finally, each of these towers has 4 penthouses, which are the most valuable kind of apartments in the whole development. So nearly the income the client got from this kind of 32 penthouses nearly paid for the whole geothermal system. So instead of kind of coming up only with the energy savings, you have to think holistic concept B to convince a client to do so. This is a building we did with Frank Kéré here in Basel, the Novartis kind of office building for the employees. So kind of in the center of the campus, this building being built. It's a fully glazed building, and Novartis on the other side promised to the city of Basel that all the buildings on the campus would be Minergie P, which is, as you know, the quite high Swiss energy standard. So this is a triple glazed building, and we find out that even with the triple glazing and a partially natural ventilation, we would not make it to the code or to this energy number. We said we have to integrate photovoltaics, but how to create a photovoltaics where the client said this building should look like a cloud. So finally, we developed together with the German PV company a translucent gray photovoltaic system, which is embedded in the roof system. So if I go back a picture, some of the areas you see on the right picture on this top, some of them are kind of photovoltaic, and I do this one, yes. So this is the photovoltaic system. This is just a fritted clear glass, and there are some more reflective glass, but in general, the roof view looked quite interesting. Frank Gehry was so proud that he developed a new product by asking for that it's gray, that this is exactly the system we finally used in his house. So this was as well a lesson how you certainly infect an architect with such an idea, finally saying, okay, if I build a house, which I probably leave for the next generation, this has to be net zero. So coming back, and I'm to another project, which in this case is the Louvre Abu Dhabi, where we collaborated with Jean Nouvel. He designed this great idea for this Louvre in Abu Dhabi with the idea that it should kind of use the harsh sun from the outside in a sheltered outdoor space to create what he calls the rain of light. Now, this is an animation. This is an animation from like the first client presentation, and they loved it. And then finally he approached us and said, Matthias, you have to make this work. And I said, Jean, this will be a hard exercise because I will probably cut down your openings. We first have to understand all the physics behind it. And I can tell you, when I saw the first pictures, I had no clue how a rain of light would work. So it was kind of all the research to do, and in this case to develop. Then we said, okay, but what is the impression? What is the brightness or the light level the architect is expecting in such a space? Now, daylight, you may model, but how you present it to your architect, because there's no screen, there's no paper which is bright enough to reflect the sun. So what we had to do, and this is a 1 to 200 scale model, we finally went into the light laboratory of the University of Stuttgart, and what you see on the top right, this is a light fixture. Yeah, this is a light fixture which normally they use in stadiums. Normally, in this light laboratory, they use other light devices with lower level. But we said we need to get up to 120,000 lux, which is a clear sunny day. So we installed this light bulb from a stadium which had to be permanently cooled, because otherwise it gets too hot and explodes. So we said, okay, this is dangerous because we will kill a Pritzker Prize winner if he comes to see this. So this was then finally where we spent nearly a day with Jean sitting there smoking cigar and making the rain of light visible, because the smoke, the particles in the air typically make these beams of light visible, changing 15 versions of the roof, 15 densities, other colors. So to make him aware what consequences it is to make this at the end happening. This is a picture looking into this dome during these tests. Then finally, around 2 years later, we built a one-to-one. This is a one-to-one mock-up, which was a dome or a kind of an element which was 27 meters high. One of the roof elements there, in this case, there is no additional smoke because the dust in Abu Dhabi is so high, the dust level, that it creates exactly this rain of light. And this is Jean Nouvel with Sheikh Sultan, the Minister of Culture. And when we explained the guy that the rain of light is something which only is connected to the local high dust level they have in the Middle East, he said, that's the first time in my life I hear something positive about this dust, because normally we have to clean our cars 2 or 3 times a week because they're all covered with this dust. So kind of connecting this basic idea of the architect to what we describe a local identity, which is this high dust level. Now, out of these tests, we kind of developed all the rules which should be followed on to finally build the building. The building, some of you have seen, this building is now ready. It opened in November last year. We finally as well were there at the opening. The roof is as well very interesting because it's a 2-layer roof. The dome spanning 180 meters is a 2-layer construction. Now, as you see, each of this layer consists of 4 layers of very regular Islamic pattern, because Nouvel kind of connecting to Islam, where you normally by the Islam religion are not allowed to make pictures of somebody. This is why they developed very strong as well, very strong patterns. He used regular patterns, but then he overlaid them 4 layers and he turned them and shifted them. And by doing so, he created a totally unregular, so if you look it from far, it doesn't look you slowly see the regular layers, but if you're finally below the dome in the space, kind of the pattern of the holes are totally unregular. What you already see, that depending on the size of the openings, which were engineered not to be too small, because if they are too small, they only create a kind of a background lighting, which is against the function of the rain of light, but they create, if they are big enough, they create these light dots, which are happening all over in the building, and depending on the time of the day, they move through the building. You can see, depending on where you are, and at certain times of the day, that the rain of light is there. It's not, and this was now measured, we did 2-day measurements in November at the opening. It was not yet as expected, not as clear as expected, because it's a bit more light, like 50% more light than expected in the real building, because some of the openings at the end were probably bigger as expected. But it's wonderful how these openings, on one side, the space is fully protected. So in a certain way, even being outside there in November, it was around 40 degrees in the sun, while under the dome, you could keep it in the range of 28, just by the shading and just by the mass, kind of remembering the temperature of the last night. Now, this is a picture which you find in the internet if you Google the rain of light in the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which means we were there in November, we couldn't see it. There are certain times when the rain of light will appear, which I think is quite nice, because this is a very sensitive system. So it's an art piece, and everybody talks about it, that the rain of light is one of the art pieces of the Louvre Abu Dhabi. And you may go there and you don't see it, which doesn't mean it's not existing. You may have to come back at a certain time when there is the right light and the right dust in the air. Now, when we do so, I think on this collaboration, we have to think about now what we do, or how we spread this idea even further, and how we spread it to markets, as Francis Kéré is talking about, like Africa, India, South America. This is what we had in mind when 5 years ago we started our internal Transsolar Academy. So every year we have 6 students from what we call the maturity world, where the majority of people is living, so from Africa, from India, from China, from South America, coming to us, be trained in-house for 1 year, architects and engineers, in a certain way, to learn what is this background and to take this idea and go back to their countries, and in a certain way, working a bit like Francis, to work in their societies to spread these ideas, and they should be the collaborators of tomorrow. Thank you.
Danke, Matthias. Great. Thank you. We have really 3 great men now for the podium, and I ask you please onto the podium, 3 men with similar ideas but very different means. The podium is led by Judit Solt. She is a mathematician by training and graduated also in architecture from the ETH in Zurich. She is known here as the chief editor of the Swiss engineering magazine periodical Tech 21. Thank you for moderating this discussion, and please come all to the panel.
Well, please join me. I think the names are not right, but it's
fine.
No problem. Please stay where you are. No.
Okay. Make sure they know you.
Anyway, everyone has got a first impression now. I must say I was really, really impressed by those presentations. And I was just, while listening to those presentations, I was kind of a bit panicking, because I was thinking so many, those are 3 completely different words, and how can I join them together to really have a discussion? But at the end, I was just calming down, because I think there are a lot of bridges between those 3 words. And one thing that was said several times, it's for people, and it's about exchanging knowledge. And I think this is a very strong connection, although the people who are exchanging this knowledge are quite different. In your case, it's about a trained architect working together with people who have traditional knowledge, but no knowledge about modern building techniques. In your case, it's a little research group trying to, as you called it, infect the partners and the project architects to try new approaches. And in your case, of course, it's the interaction between architects and engineers. So I think collaboration and communication is a very strong thing. Now, maybe I would like to start with a quite concrete question. You talked about these hospital buildings in Rwanda. Now, this was made by architects who are not from there, so they don't have this chance that you, Francis, have to communicate directly with the people and to talk their language and to understand their minds in order to convince them also, to listen to them properly. How did you get to the point?
Okay, it's quite interesting. Okay, I think they had even one African member in the team when they worked on it, but they kind of had it more, let's call it, they had it more like a vision. But then they were open-minded enough when they traveled there to learn from the local people and accept what it's possible to do there. And I think, as Francis kind of said, in this case, they didn't know it, but hopefully, and I'm guessing they talked to the elderly people, that it's a pretty good idea to work with the local people, that they build it instead of bringing someone from outside who would produce this hospital, which then would land there like an UFO. And I think this was their openness to do so, and now Mass Design, who's now up to 50 people, they already have an architectural school. They created an architectural school in Africa, so they are training as well local architects to work. So there's a great TED talk of one of their African partners in there. So I think they are more and more melting together with the local people.
Mm-hmm. So it's quite important, this identification of the users with the building. Now, in your case, it is really clear too. You said if the people are committed, if they build the house themselves, if they are convinced that it is based on their tradition, then they will keep it up. They will look to it. They won't destroy it if there are problems. So, in your case, it's a little bit different because I mean you are doing your research and then you have to convince first your colleagues in the office, and then the external.
First ourselves.
Aha, okay. Because you have doubts.
Definitely we have, because as I said, like we start out with an idea, a research question, but it also depends on who we collaborate with, and they guide us in a lot of directions as well. Suddenly we, in the beginning, really hope that this can become something, and suddenly in the end, we completely ended up with another output. So in this case, I think this has also really grown for us the last couple of years. After we changed office, before we had like 2 levels, now we have one flat plan. This allows us really to float together. So I would say that a lot of us are now not only working on research, we are really integrated in teams now. So a lot of the designers as well are beginning to also ask the right questions. Mm-hmm. We have this talk at the moment internally about, and this is a generalist versus specialist. Because we still see people coming out with a super high specialty in some area, but how can you expect them to understand the designer's everyday life? So we need to also have them to understand the workflows before we start actually integrating and putting all of these new knowledge in. So it is first of all also to train the designers, but the designers are already skilled. So it is really a communication thing, I guess, now in terms of that.
Mm-hmm. Francis, you have also this communication in the Serpentine Gallery. You had, as a partner, you had a highly specialized, very competent firm. So you have really the whole range between people living in a village and having no knowledge about modern techniques, and the highly specialized guy who knows most of modern techniques. Where are the differences in the communication, or are there no differences?
I mean, first of all, here is time. So if you work with a professional company, engineer company, you can be efficient. So you have to be efficient. In Burkina Faso or where I work, so everywhere in Africa, we realize that we often have no time. So you have to spend more time to explain. But here, you have a very good organized structure, which is for yourself also demanding. But I was trained in Germany, so I have been like playing a role of a bridge, between two cultures of making. The one side is the world of, I will call it world of knowledge, and then the other one is the world of the future. That is, things are growing, and so you need time in Africa to allow things to grow. But here you have already everything, and it is much more sophisticated. But because of the education, it was not a big deal for me. So. Yeah, it's about traveling and switching off. If you work in Burkina, I may say the tolerances, the gap, the tolerance. We call it construction tolerances. Maybe that size, that is no problem. And if you do the same in Germany, maybe it is like
3 millimeters
here. But for example, if you do in Swiss, there is. So, and you have to learn to do that. There is no gap. So the same with the serpentine. So, but we, most of the people in building sectors nowadays are so open, and so e-com has the ability to just understand someone like me that says, I want it to be completely open. The serpentine people knows about it, and we have together to fix issue of cost. For example, for the structure, if you want to use bricks, they will tell you in this giving time, just 1 month, it will increase the cost of the project about 35,000 hours, man hours. And this is a lot of money in the West. In Burkina, this is good, we have a lot of people. You just get them work. And so this is where you travel and you play a role of a bridge. It's a great job. Very demanding, but it's great.
You talked about time and taking your time. Now, it's clear in Switzerland we are really, really, really efficient and everything has to go very fast. And maybe it's an advantage. I mean, if you want to have something done quickly and precisely, that's an advantage. But for some things, you need time for reflection. And I'm not sure if we go in the right direction, because some things really have to stop, so that you are obliged to think about it another time and another time again, because otherwise, why think again? I mean, you're in a hurry, and maybe in this case it's more the experience that helps. I mean, maybe you don't have the time to think very long on one project, but if you do several projects, then you add your experience.
Yeah, I think after 25 years you have a certain experience. On the other side, it's clear, and it's, I think, valuable on both sides, on the engineering and on the architecture side. If you have more time, the solution gets better. And we learned it in projects with Benisch and Peter Sumtor. It takes a time to develop solution. And sometimes architects have even to rethink at a certain point. And the danger we see today is often that they finish to design after schematic design, and then in design development and construction documents, they only produce. And this may not lead to the best solution. And I think this is something we have to be aware on, that if it's a great idea in the beginning, it may develop, but if it's already optimized, that's something we really have to question.
So, at what time do the architects call you? Because I mean, the architects start with their design and with their innovation, but you come at an even later point, so your time is even shorter.
Yeah, but we are like the IOC pavilion with 3XN. We worked with them on the competition. So I would say still 60% of our jobs we get by competition. So in this case, we already developed the shape of the building before they present it to the client, that it already integrates these ideas. And I think this is very important because otherwise you come as an add-on and you would put a solar panel on it. But if it's, let's say, the shape of the building, the size of the atrium, the staircase in the middle where we discussed about how the ventilation would go, this has to be a part of the architectural design. And this is why you have to be in early. And we do a lot of, I can tell you, we do a lot of competitions, which mostly are, like in the architect's case, unpaid. But this is kind of how you get in so early that really this sustainable design is an integrated part of the building form.
Mm-hmm. So then you work with architects who already share your values.
Yes.
How to convince the others?
I think this is, in this case, my kind of strategy to say, if they see that whatever, Aravena or Katsuyo Seshima or Frank Gehry or Jean Nouvel, that they are able to share these ideas into their design, because often it was an argument to say, oh yeah, if it's a good design, it can consider it. But if top-level architects can integrate it in their architecture and you can't, then you have to ask yourself if you may be a bad architect. So this is very provocative, but I think this is the point where challenging the people, thinking about that this is not something which is not possible to do. So you have to get them interested, and I think everybody in Europe, at least in Europe, knows that we are facing a big problem, and buildings should perform better than they do today. And this is a challenge we as designers, we have for the next generation of buildings.
Mm-hmm. So actually this conviction must become everybody's or the designer's conviction, so that you just feel stupid if you spend energy on cooling
That's why
a house if you can cool it naturally.
Exactly, right. And okay, it's luckily in Switzerland some regulations are already kind of not allowing to do mechanical cooling at certain spaces. But I think the other point is that this is why we do as well a lot of education, because you have to trigger it in the architects' minds from the beginning. And when Ken described that in their university, they already learned to collaborate. I think this is the point where you need to put the seeds of this holistic understanding into the minds of the young people, that as well the engineers, as well the architects know that this is something they cannot do on their own, that this is a collaborative effort they have to approach.
But is it not a contradiction when you think, I mean, that this, you have shown a lot of innovation based actually on low tech. So it's very innovative, but it's made with quite simple things, traditional techniques, just water that is pumped up anyway. So the means are quite simple. Of course, you have to understand physics, which is a little bit less simple, but once you understand the principle, the thing is quite easy, and it doesn't need a lot of energy or a lot of means. It's just bricks and water, and the hole there and the hole here, and then the air circulates. So you just use what's here. It's low tech, but high comfort. And I mean, the young people grow up in a world where everything is quite high tech. I mean, you are working with very elaborate technical solutions, digital methods. You talked about this model and the models of the engineers that are compatible together. So how do the young people bring that together? I mean, to work with high tech to produce low tech at the end, which is much more innovative than what our parents built.
Yeah, now I can't talk for 10 or 20 years experience yet, but I will go back to the whole education again, because what I think is really important, as was mentioned, is that back then we really didn't know. The cases that we had was also built on these like low-tech things, and that's what we had to compare up against. That's what we saw, we were trained in. And now when you see all of these projects like the IOC and the whole portfolio of Transsolar and Matthias, it's really nice to see that now if you bring this back to the classroom, that they can see all of these techniques in Africa and in a lot of places in the world, that they can begin to also understand these techniques in different aspects of the design. I still see when we get like young guns in that come in with, they know all of these tools and they can do this and this and this. but as soon as we start designing, they don't have a clue about the principles. It's still the principles that we are back to, all of the principles that we talked about and it was presented. It's still those key things before you go advanced into all of these digital tools and collaborative efforts.
So you really have to go back to the basic principles in order to use them?
For me personally, I believe that. I think you need a foundation. And for me, this is kind of the core setup, that you need the principles before you go advanced. And that's kind of also the design agenda at 3XN. It's, even though we have these shapes and the ideas on how we design, we also have the experience of, if we do this curve and we do this angle, then we have an idea. If the sun is here, then it maybe helps to self-shade or something like that. So it's again back to the simple principles in the beginning with the shape, and then we start adding all of these technologies on top of it afterwards. That's my point of view.
And is it not difficult to convince? I mean, you mentioned it, that it was quite difficult to go back to Burkina Faso and to tell them, okay, we are doing an innovative building, but with the local material and the local techniques. And you said that people were looking at you and asking themselves now, what has he learned in Germany if he comes back with the same techniques?
Yeah. No, it's about experience, let's say. In my home village, I was sure that if you build a clay house, which is quite small in comparison to the school, you need to fix it every 2 or every year after a rainy season. And now if someone from the community come back and talking about that is good and we have to build up on that if you want to have a better future, I mean, they get shocked. And there was a comment, I mean, he was in Germany and some people seriously were thinking I get brainwashed in Germany. It's not just a joke. They were saying he went there to learn something where they build the best cars in the world, and he come back and want us to keep living in mud. But I mean, even so if you don't see that, but if you know it is about the struggle always to make it, then you want to make a building bigger, of course they are afraid it's going to crash by the next. But again, so we have to prove. And here you can't use the digital world to do. I mean, we do also, like the Serpentine Pavilion. I am doing physical model, so I now understand how a worker can carry on what, and so try to train. At Serpentine, we was able for the first time to walk up in the building with Ecom. I could see it. So here you see it, but you cannot use these in the place of the majority. I love that. The place of the majority where you know, Barley, for example, in Burkina Faso, that is the biggest university in Ouagadougou, where you have less than 60 computers for many, many thousands of students. If you put this in mind, you know that you cannot use that. You have to find a way to translate. It's about, you know, making real mock-up to let them understand that what we do a lot of more mock-up and then always putting weight on that, and people see and they believe. But here, everyone understand, we studied. Yeah. So it's, I mean, it's about see what we can do. At the end, is the same. It's research and teaching as well. Yeah. It is. No one accept.
Mm-hmm. One point that makes the things even a little bit more complicated or complex is not only the communication with between the client and the engineers and architects and planners and the users, but also that they all speak different languages and have different methods of approach a building or a project. But then we have seen today a lot of international projects. So Japanese architect builds for German miners. I mean, even if we forget all this collaborative planning and ecological issues, I mean, how can this work? Or in your case, you are based in Europe and you are building for Sydney. How can you, and in a competition it's even more difficult because you have no direct contact or not much direct contact. So you have to bring a project that is so communicative that the client understands it, even if you are coming from a completely different culture. So also here you have a translation that has to happen in order to convince and to get this commitment that you need to get the thing done. And maybe what is your experience in this field? How can
regarding the
what can we learn?
What can we learn? Like what we do, we always work with a local architect that knows the game, knows the rules, like also maybe have an idea of the clients. But also, just want to take it in a bit of another direction. I also first believe that you need an strong internal collaborative mindset first in your organization, and then you begin to build on top of that and sharing. I see now, because we are slowly opening up these small offices in Sydney, in New York, Stockholm has been there for a lot of years, that we also internally need to understand now how we begin to work on these projects together. Because before we were all sitting together, but now it's becoming this, you send a mail or you send a model, and then what happens with this one here? So that's becoming the next challenge for us internally, like how are we going to do this collaboration internally with these models here? But first and foremost, we always work with the clients or local architects from the neighborhood, or from the area, or from the country.
So in order to commit the client, you have to commit yourself. Be there.
Yeah, somehow, we definitely have to show our like we are there and we want it, and of course, that they believe in us and what we want to do, and that we are committed also when we hopefully have won the project, that we're also there like afterwards to really develop with the client and with the engineers.
So what you said, if the country calls the sun, you have to go.
Yes.
That's not only for you, it's for all the planners here.
Yeah, but I have to say here, in Matthias' case, so experience creates a certain credibility. Yep. I mean, if you are a young team and you have a project where there was no example before, and you have a name and people just check and see, oh, wow, with him, he's able to produce, it creates more credibility. But if you just start by your own, people will stamp you as a dreamer on project. A visionary idea may not come true. That's why, I mean, it is to prove, I mean, the team need to be strong at the end. If you have no good partner, if it came of complicated things that have never been done before, a name may help. Burkina, when I started the work, I even know that in one conference I didn't attend it. I would, but often there is no time to share. But I know that someone was saying, so we don't do like Kéré is doing. And then he adds something that was great to me. He's doing research. So from that time, I was very proud. So that someone tried to discredit you, to say we are doing good. But he used something that was good to me, because people came and they was angry about it. I said, no, but he's describing right what I'm doing. I have to prove. In Burkina, you need example to do, or you have a credible name, and we don't have. Architecture was always considered something like connected to big structure or coming from in. If you check the independence building, or whatever every European are talking about how nice they are, that was done from people that own the knowledge that time, and even without implication of the local. We love that, but then the fact is people cannot maintain. If I go deeper in my village, and people say, oh, he's digging in mud, he's not interested. And today I go in the airport, or before you jump out from the taxi, minimum 3 people will talk to you, trying to say, Monsieur, je vous connais. Or in Burkina, they do like that. Monsieur, attendez, Mister, wait, I know you. So you understand, and then, okay, you get to use it, and they say that later they will come again. Is not you the architect that builds something like something? I like it. Yeah. So how can I have that? So it's changing. There I have to prove, but I have time to prove. Look at Jerry is 88.
Yeah, no. This is, and he goes to work, and sometimes he writes me email when something goes wrong in his house. Then I get an email and said, Matthias, I'm 88 years old. I go to work every day. Yeah. My house had to work, so this is was a kind of a challenge to make sure that this house, and we are online checking the house every day. What is interesting, we found out, because in summer he wrote me an email and said, Matthias, it's not comfortable, and we thought it's too warm. It was too cold. If you are 88 years old, your target is not 22, but 25.
Now you see, you have to listen to your client.
Yes.
Yes, you have to commit yourself to your client and to the people who live there. We started with the statement. I think we can close this panel exactly with that statement. You have to listen to the people, you work for the people, what we do is for the people, so we have to communicate. The question, or a little bit a rhetoric question of this whole event, of this fair here, of the Swissbau was together or all by themselves, collaborative design or not, and of course, I mean, our answer today is quite clear. It has to be collaborative, and not only between the specialists and not only with digital tools, which is a little bit suggested in this fair, but also with the clients and with all the means we have, with language, with ideas, with standing on your own roof in order to prove that it holds, with everything that is needed to convince the people, to make them proud, and to involve them in a world that actually is a common world. So we have to build it together. Thank you very, very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your really inspiring inputs. And I give back to Christian, who has made all this possible.
Yes, thank you that you stayed here for 2 hours and that you were interested in these questions. Certainly, it is a collaborative world, but we need single signatures like these 3 men here that bring on this collaboration through the world. Thank you very much. Diese Veranstaltung können Sie auch auf swissbau.com nachschauen oder weiterempfehlen und selbstverständlich auch bei uns, architekturdialoge.ch Podcast, ist das auch in der Zukunft zu sehen. Am 10., 17. und 24. April fahren wir weiter, die Architekturdialoge in einem kleineren Format. Wir werden Vorträge mit dem Thema Architektur und Beton in interdisziplinären Zusammenhang präsentieren. Sie werden die Einladung erhalten. Durchs Jahr besuchen wir auch Sites von jüngeren Architekten, 10 Städten von Neubauten. Auch das ist ein Format von unserem Stiftung. Wer den Newsletter erhalten möchte, Mitglied der Freunde der Architekturdialoge werden will, kann sich am Infodesk dort vorne noch informieren oder auch unsere Webseite konsultieren. Nochmal herzlichen Dank den Referenten, der Moderatorin und auch den Presenting-Partner Swissbau und den Sponsoren Baum Swiss und Stahlbau Pichler, die das möglich gemacht haben. Danke, liebes Publikum. Ich wünsche euch noch einen schönen Swissbau-Tag und bis in 2 Jahren wieder. Besten Dank. Schönen Tag.